This is completely out of left field. I was solely concerned with doing Emma a favor when I heard that Otis was coming to spend a few weeks with us. Since nobody is home, there's no reason not to. I pondered. I thought it would be wonderful to have some youthful energy about, what with Andrew's lengthy journeys and quiet nights. But today, as I watched Otis enter, I felt the need to take a big breath. No longer was he that innocent youngster. The timid, uneasy child I knew as Emma's son had blossomed into a towering, self-assured young man. The unassuming t-shirt he wore flaunted his well-toned physique, and his shy but endearing grin diverted my attention. I kept doubting my own judgment. Is it fair to view him in this light, given how much he's grown? Part of me was relieved that Otis was staying since I knew Andrew would be gone for weeks again. Being home alone was the worst. However, I was also overcome with an inexplicable sense of discomfort. His mere presence awoke in me a peculiar feeling of peril as well as excitement. I knelt down to assist him with his luggage, and our arms just touched for an instant. I was astonished by how warm his skin felt. It seemed as if Otis was either oblivious or chose not to display any signs of it. For me, though, that was the turning point. I pondered the same question over and over again that night while I tore myself to pieces in bed. Is this going to get out of hand? Or is Otis's stay going to be like any other visit? Be sure to subscribe to our channel and enable notifications if you would want to get updates like this first. Some truly unexpected twists are on the horizon for this drama. I've always been the type of lady who gets noticed for my attractiveness. It has often been said that I appear younger than my years due to my voluptuous hips, smooth skin, and curved body. I have always been confident in my figure, so I have no problem wearing low-cut tops or other figure-hugging clothes. I began to reevaluate my clothing choices after I found out Otis was going to be staying. I felt the need to tone it down a bit when I was around someone as young, gorgeous, and striking as him. Emma begged me to do a favor for Otis because he was rejected from college. She suggested letting him remain with you for a bit to lift his spirits. His spirits have been down recently, notwithstanding his dreams. Emma is so irresistible. My fear of being home alone intensified when Andrew left on his long hauls. I had never felt such a tense mixture of anticipation and an unclassifiable unease until Otis stepped through that door. He stands tall with strong shoulders and a toned physique. His exuberance and charm betrayed his youth. He resembled a Hollywood actor even in his most casual attire of a t-shirt and sweatpants. I promised myself that you would treat him more like an aunt. However, I sensed in my heart that it wouldn't be so easy. Our plan was to have breakfast together the following morning. When Otis was around, I was warier of wearing my mini nightgown to bed than usual. I reached into my closet for the most understated robe, draped it over myself, and made my way to the kitchen. He arrived wearing shorts and a gray tank top. I couldn't help but stare at him as his strong arms lay on the table. "Thanks for making breakfast, Olivia," he remarked with his customary shy but kind smile. I told Otis it was absolutely no problem. "Stay as long as you need, you have our full support. Do what feels right to you. Together we will find a solution." Otis seemed to be on the verge of speaking up, but then he paused as if he weren't sure if he should. After waiting for him to speak, I vented my frustrations when he remained silent. "I want to know, why were you not accepted to college? You must have had quite the following as a student, didn't you?" Shrugging, he smiled timidly. In all candor, I found it impossible to divert my attention from sports. Even though I struggled academically, my lifelong goal has always been to work as a personal fitness trainer. How about in terms of social media? You might argue I was a little too noticeable, I suppose. I arched an eyebrow in his direction. "Girls just couldn't resist being around you, is that what you're saying?" Although he avoided looking, the subtle smile on his face conveyed all. He conceded something along those lines. Now more than ever, though, I need to straighten out my life. Otis's forthright admission captivated me and aroused my interest. There was an air of mounting tension between us as we sat at the table and spoke. It was thrilling in a way that words couldn't describe, seeing someone so young, driven, and vulnerable sitting across from me. It appeared like just another typical morning breakfast. However, I sensed in my heart that this visit would shake things up in my life. It could have been the age gap that really bothered me. With my age at 39, Otis was barely 20. How long had it been since I'd been in the company of someone so youthful, vibrant, and dreamy? His energetic presence evoked a sense of longing, transporting me to a bygone era when I still pursued my aspirations independently. An era when I experienced a level of vitality that I hadn't felt in a long time. Or perhaps it wasn't solely him. Perhaps Andrew was to blame. Over time, the romance in my marriage had dwindled. Andrew spent most of his time away from home because he was a truck driver. Even when he returned home, we were at a loss for conversation. The passion we once shared had gradually waned as the years passed. I felt certain that my love for Andrew remained unshaken. However, I'd recently come to realize that love isn't always sufficient. Early that day, Otis snatched his exercise bag and made a beeline for the exit. He said, "See you later tonight," as he confidently strided away, his back muscles showing. I just waved and grinned. "Be careful," I said. On the other hand, I had completely different thoughts going through my head. Suffocating stillness settled over the home. Slumped onto the living room couch with my coffee in hand, I retrieved my phone. I gave Andrew a ring. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally picked up the phone. He said, "Hey Olivia," with his customary weary tone. "Is everything all right?" "No worries," I reassured them. However, I was unable to conceal the glaring lack of emotion in my voice. A pause ensued. "Even this week will be jam-packed. The revised route I took will cause me to come home a few days later than anticipated," he announced. Even I wasn't surprised by this point. I drew in a long breath and shut my eyes. "Thank you, Andrew. Just stay safe, all right?" I ended the call after responding briefly. After the call ended, I felt an odd melancholy. Emma contacted shortly thereafter. "Your assistance with Otis is much appreciated, Olivia." She expressed her gratitude for her caregiver's vigilant watch over him. "Emma, it's absolutely not an issue. This is a perfect fit for him. He looks to be doing well," I told him, "because he's been going to the gym regularly. You are attempting to assist him, and I can tell. It is quite meaningful. However, he may use some additional guidance. There must be some way for him to realize his ambitions even if he forgoes college." Naturally, I responded. My faith in Otis's ability to fulfill those desires was unwavering. A peculiar sense of urgency washed over me after hearing Emma speak. It was as if she was relying on me to lead him. When nightfall arrived, Otis had returned from his workout at the gym. I met up with an old acquaintance for coffee while he was gone. The lights were turned on in the residence the moment I arrived. As I entered the house, I could make out the soft light and low sound of the television in the far corner of the living room. I stepped inside and found Otis on the couch, completely exhausted. Surely he has only just dried off from a shower. He was only wearing a towel around his waist, but it had fallen down to expose his thighs in spots. With his eyes closed, he held the remote control. As a result of his strenuous exercise, he must have fallen asleep. My gaze roved over his physique almost involuntarily. You can see the definition in his powerful legs and back muscles. The kind of toned physique that only hours of rigorous exercise can produce. Really, I did my best to avert my gaze. However, I couldn't help but keep staring at him. I tried to calm myself by taking a long breath, but the sight had affected me in ways I was ashamed to acknowledge. Intense emotions surfaced, but I did my best to bury them. I reprimanded myself in silence. "Olivia, what on earth are you up to? Every single thing about this is inappropriate." I got closer, intending to fix the towel over him, but as soon as I extended my hand, I withdrew it. I was afraid about waking him up and getting myself into that embarrassing spot. Rather, I took the remote control out of his hand and set it down on the table. I subsequently retrieved a covering from the adjacent room and returned to him. Even though I left the living room, my pulse rate remained high. I couldn't stop replaying the scene of him in my head. Had I imagined a parallel between his youth and mine? Or was something stirring within me because of Otis's presence? What? It had been years since I'd felt that? As the night wore on, I lay in bed, closed my eyes, and still couldn't get any rest. My psyche was seared with that scene. It persisted despite my best efforts to overcome it. I was frightened, but I couldn't help but be oddly curious by it. We sat at the dinner table opposite each other the following night. Throughout the day, we remained indoors and didn't engage in much conversation. However, during dinner we managed to get into a rhythm of talking. We finished our meals with glasses of wine and poured ourselves another round, during which our conversation became increasingly personal. It was Otis's custom to be courteous. "Olivia, you're genuinely such a strong woman," he suddenly exclaimed, directly staring into my eyes. The unexpected praise shocked and touched me profoundly. "Why do you think that?" My face lit up as I asked. However, a growing warmth was permeating my entire being. According to Otis, it's easy to tell. Even in our conversation, it's clear. You've maintained your beauty and optimism through all that life has thrown at you. Doing it is not a simple task. I raised my wine glass and took a tiny drink. I joked that it was harder than it seems. You have to be strong all the time, even when you're not. A concerned expression spread across Otis' face. His voice had become softer, but he still mentioned that he knew. However, that in no way diminishes your uniqueness. His remark struck me square in the chest. It had been long since anyone had evoked such strong emotions in me. Andrew and I had always maintained an emotionally detached connection. Most of the time I felt lonely because he didn't pay attention to me. Yet Otis was present, next to me seated. Someone who could relate to me and give me the impression that I was important. Smiling, I lifted my glass to the sky. "Is that so?" I inquired. "Otis, I don't understand why you aren't achieving all your life goals. You possess an exceptional combination of charm, good looks, and competence. It seems like people will go to extraordinary lengths to help you." Laughter escaped Otis's lips. "You have no idea. I guess it's because nobody ever seems to genuinely care about my desires." I felt the weight of their words. I made it clear that I understood. Sometimes it's hard to be authentic no matter how hard we try. Our sense of being seen is diminished. As our gazes met, Otis gave me a subtle nod. "Yes, exactly. However, Olivia, you're not the same. My interest in you grows as our relationship develops." I could feel my heart pounding. Something about his remarks made me feel alive. My voice was softer than previously when I mentioned that you were also different. "No one has ever understood me as you do." A hush fell over the room. We couldn't help but stare at one another. What was happening is beyond my ability to describe. However, a pulling sensation existed between us. A bond, physical and emotional. Otis cautiously leaned in. I leaned in his direction as well, quite unconsciously. In that instant, all of my anxieties, uncertainties, and hesitances vanished. My heart raced with anticipation as our lips connected. It had been years since I'd felt that. I failed to consider the consequences of my actions. The overwhelming intimacy consumed me. A profound sense of inclusion. Otis and that kiss were about more than simply physical desire. It seemed as if I had unearthed a long-lost aspect of my identity. My head was banging when I finally opened my eyes. The first thing that caught my eye was made apparent by the room's low lighting. Lying next to me is the corpse. Sitting up, I tried to stabilize myself by taking a big breath. There was Otis, dozing off next to me in nothing but his undies. I felt my pulse quicken. "Tell me what transpired." In an effort to recall what happened that night, I shut my eyes firmly. The vintage. The sound of the laughing. His fierce gaze fixed on me. Lips. Physical contact. Nevertheless, after that, details became hazy. It was as though the night had melted away into thin air. I got out of bed in an effort to silence the buzzing in my head. I examined my reflection while I rubbed my temples. I had not changed out of my underwear. Everything seemed more tangible the moment I laid eyes on it. The room was otherwise dead silent except for Otis's gentle snores. "Olivia, what were you up to?" To myself I murmured. I raced to the restroom, locked the door, and turned on the shower. I felt a combination of shock and another sensation as I stood beneath the water's flow. A state of tranquility that was almost there. This was the most alive I'd felt in a long time. Meanwhile, an overwhelming sense of shame was beginning to take hold and bite me. The whirlwind of feelings threw me for a loop. How did I allow myself to become so intimate with him? What did Otis feel, and more importantly, why? I didn't know what to do with Andrew. As I attempted to collect my thoughts, I remained submerged in the hot water for what seemed like an eternity. Even though I don't recall much of the night, what little I do recall was more than enough. That which binds Otis to me. I felt it all, and it was intense. Some part of me realized how completely incorrect this was. Otis, being Emma's kid, was merely a visitor at my residence. I am a young man. Still, I couldn't shake the feelings he had stirred up in me that night. Seen. Urgently needed. Staying alive. My thoughts were racing with potential next steps as I bundled myself in the towel as I emerged from the shower. Just a few days later, Andrew would be returning. We had our share of problems, but this was beyond anything we had ever experienced before. Can Otis be disregarded? Can I simply put that night in the past? All the things I told myself seemed to be falsehoods. Had what transpired with Otis been a mere accident, or had it provided the solution I had been seeking throughout? Otis was wide awake when I returned to the living room. His expression was one of conflicting emotions, guilt, perhaps even relief. With a subtle smile, he commented, "You're very silent for this time of the morning." My mouth sprang open in shock. Looking at him, a little voice in my brain warned that things were already chaotic and would only become worse. However, Otis's face betrayed no signs of guilt. It was almost comforting in its tranquility and steadiness. "You, Otis, were out late last night." Words just wouldn't come out of my mouth. "It's all right, Olivia," he whispered gently. His tone was gentle and soothing. "Nothing needs to be explained to me. Just so you know, I didn't sense anything amiss about it." His remarks intensified the chaos swirling within me. I knew then that there was no turning back. It was possible that I would have no influence over what happened after everything had altered. When Andrew returned, what would happen? If Emma ever discovered, what would she say? The most pressing concern, though, was what Otis and I should do next. Andrew was not due back until the following night. I stood by the living room window, peering out, while Otis ate something quietly in the kitchen. As night fell, the coolness of the evening settled in and the air became even more still. As I spoke, I couldn't tell if I was addressing Otis or myself. Either way, I expressed my shock at having become someone with such ridiculous ideas. With a glass of water in his hand, he emerged from the kitchen. I felt that same inquisitive, profound look return as our eyes locked. He spoke in that steady voice of his. "I know what you're thinking. But Olivia, life sometimes leads us to unexpected places, and what we discover there can be the most genuine experience we've ever had." My response was muffled since the words wouldn't come out. It was then that I felt the weight of the atmosphere between us. After making his way here, Otis sat down next to me. At last I confessed that I had no idea what would happen next. I uttered no more than a whisper. "Knowing your own desires is more important than having anyone else's," he said. How could someone so young feel so wise? Baffled me for a second. Otis put a delicate touch on my shoulder as I felt tears beginning to form in my eyes. I mentioned that Andrew will be returning tomorrow, and then things will return to how they normally are. Otis inhaled deeply. Resuming the previous state? Or turning around? Similarly to that fateful night, those words remain imprinted in my memory. The house was strangely silent when morning arrived. Otis had vanished. More than ever before, the vacuum he left behind was palpable. I discovered a message on the table where we eat. "Olivia, you should always be open to the path life leads you." Simply put, there are moments when life's journeys take you to your true destiny, despite your best efforts to avoid it. That road, though, it never fails to be stunning. The Otis. I glanced out the window once more, this time with the note in my palm. The depth and emptiness of my feelings at that moment would remain with me forever. Otis swept into my life like a tempest and vanished as swiftly. However, the scars he left behind? They intended to remain present. Only one question remained now that Andrew was on his way home. In the end, which path in life would I take? You must have been deeply affected by this narrative if you have continued reading this far. Stay tuned because there's a ton more information I want you to hear. Please consider subscribing, enabling alerts, and commenting on this story. Please share your opinions in the comments section. I am eager to read them. I am incredibly grateful for your support. So long.